Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Beth McBreen and we are here today to talk about, is it time to replace business planning and consolidation? I assume that if you're dialing in or listening in today, that you're familiar with that acronym, that you're possibly using BPC today. So we'll be covering off a couple of different things that I thought we could share today in our webinar. So one, we'll go through, many of you, again, if you're already using BPC, you maybe already have eyes on what that roadmap looks like. We'll touch on it high level, right? And kind of look at what might be a natural progression into SAC and how that also stacks up from a product comparison perspective. So I have a couple slides to kind of talk at a macro level as well as dial into some of the details. But then when we get into what I wanted to do is jump over to a live demonstration of SAP Analytics Cloud, but really through more of a lens of, hey, I'm coming from currently using BPC. What does that mean for me? So looking at it from an end user perspective, we'll start in the Excel add-in, right? And we'll kind of talk about strengths and maybe limitations there. We'll also jump into the web and we'll talk about some of the strengths and even, again, limitations there, right? And so the idea and hope that we can gather from the end, by the end of this session is to, again, get a little bit more insight as to, from an end user view, what would it look like if we were to start transitioning our consolidations or our planning over to SAC. And then also we'll tap into a little bit on the administration side as well, right? We'll look at some of the modeling, security, business rules, and we'll just touch on those, again, highlighting where we have some similarities and differences just to help you kind of do an overall evaluation. At this point, again, I mentioned my name is Beth McBreen. I'm a client partner here at Simplify Solutions. I've been working with the BPC solution back since it was OutlookSoft, back like 2003, 2004. Started consulting and implementing that solution in 2007. So I've been working with that tool for a very long time, and also been working and implementing, architecting, designing the SAC solution for, again, probably about 6-7 years, pretty much since its inception. So my role at Simplify, right, is to make sure from an end-to-end, from the time that you want to start evaluating a product to us going live, is successful, that you're happy with the product, that you're happy with us. Just 2 seconds on Simplify. If you are not familiar with our company, right, we are more of a niche boutique firm focusing on SAP's suite of planning, analytics, consolidation solutions. We are considered a go-to partner for SAP in that analytics and planning space. As I mentioned before, we look to have 100% referenceable clients, right? It is what helps us thrive and grow. We're located primarily, we have, we do projects everywhere, right? But where our offices are, we have a corporate office in Chicago area, as well as Montreal. So we do some significant amount of business, obviously, worldwide, but throughout the US as well as Canada. And again, as I mentioned before, kind of focused on that planning, analytics, consolidation suite. So when we say, from a technology focus, right, this is your BPC product and your SAC product, much of what we're going to talk about today, but other things like group reporting, DataSphere, PAPM and others. So we certainly kind of round out that area. And what we do is we kind of combine also our Simplify name with our Planify platform, right? And so what is that? We have kind of a branded platform of applications, prepackaged content that we support. And so, again, if we just kind of maybe fast forward to the next slide to not spend too much time, but just to kind of dial into that a little bit, we have, again, invested hours and hours of prepackaged content that we're able to utilize when we go into a project, right, in an implementation. What this does for you is it certainly helps cut down on that overall implementation time. If I just give an example, right, you can see the list here of all sampling of our different prepackaged content that we have. HR planning, that might traditionally might take 10, 12 weeks to stand up a model and get things running. I've now implemented a few of them with our standard content. We're really closer to a 6-7 week implementation, and they're off and running. So certainly allows us to cut down. We do kind of a fit to standard assessment, and where you might have, certain areas that we want to be specific on or customized to your company's requirements. But all in all, this certainly, the overall prepackaged content that we have around our planning and analytics, as well as consolidations, can help, accelerate that timeline for you. All right, so now let's get into the conversation at hand, right, our topic. First thing that we want to cover off is just in and around BPC roadmap in general. And many of you, again, if you're using BPC today, this probably isn't new information, but just to kind of level set, right? We know that from a product roadmap perspective, we look at planning and we look at consolidations. And now the way that SAP roadmap is explained, right, is that planning, we have solutions, either SAP Analytics Cloud or BPC. And the way that we kind of look at those is, BPC really focused on customers that require an on-premise solution. More and more, we see companies that are leaning or expanding into cloud applications. We also know that from an S4 strategy, SAP Analytics Cloud is really the go-to solution as it relates to planning, analytics, reporting, and so forth. On the consolidation side, we also know that on that S4HANA track, we also have group reporting that is embedded within the S4 layer, as well as BPC, again, is continued to be consolidations. And I'll talk a little bit about today and one of the future slides around SAC for consolidations as well. And maybe if you're looking at evaluating, right? I've had some of our existing BPC customers asking me, well, is it possible? Can we consolidate an SAC, right? So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. We have done a number of SAC consolidation implementations to date already. So, but this, again, at a high level, we understand directionally where SAP is going from a product perspective. And then again, this may not be new information to those of you that are using BPC today. As far as the mainstream maintenance, end of life, I think that these numbers or these dates, the last time I checked, should be good in terms of maintenance, but as well as then the support based on the version that you're on, right? So if you're just running BPC standard NetWeaver, you're supported at least through like 2030, right? As well as, if you decide to say upgrade to the BW for HANA, version 11, for example, right, you have a little bit more, even more extension. If you're running BPC Microsoft right now, that is something that we probably, if we can help you do some evaluations on maybe what would be the next step, you start to be get into, where we're end of life maintenance coming up here shortly with 2024. So a lot of words on this slide. I just want to have a couple call outs, and I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning of the webinar. I will have my contact information at the end. If this is information that I can help provide, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to share this information with you or share the deck with you. But really kind of the call outs here, right, is that BPC continues to be part of the overall portfolio, right, when it comes to planning and consolidation. What we are seeing is, there are going to continue to be reasons for requiring an on-premise application. And so we have a couple examples there. But in large part, the point wanting to get across on this slide is that while you might see some incremental enhancements in BPC, right? There might be a break fix that needs to be updated. There might need to be, a small like customer enhancement, but we're not seeing large strides, right? That BPC is a mature solution that will continue to work as it does today. Where you're seeing these enhancements and the innovation and is really within the SAP Analytics Cloud solution, right? And so one of the ways that, if I kind of move to the next slide here, one of the ways that I've worked with some of my clients is creating that hybrid approach. So this is just to throw out a couple different examples, right? Company that is using BPC for planning and consolidations. They are not yet interested in looking at group reporting, or S4 really isn't in the near horizon, right? So, but they want to take advantage of some of the neat functionality and other that they see when they have already seen some of like the overview demos of SAC. So a couple different we've done where we keep consolidations in BPC and we extend that planning out to SAC. So now they're cost center managers or they're business sales managers. Right now we're able to extend that out to that community, those planners, and they're able to enter that in, enter in their budget or forecast information, send that back, and then they can obviously consolidate everything within BPC. It's nice, we have some bi-directional integration set up, so you have that capability. Other companies are just kind of dipping their toes in and using SAC for more of a reporting or dashboard visualization, excuse me. So where they're just extending and asking their executive leadership team, like, this is how you're going to access your information, right? Is now going through a web app, bookmark it on Chrome and being able to access your reporting books that way. So seeing a couple of different variations of it, but in almost every case where we've done a hybrid or an extension of BPC, it's given them the ability to kind of move slower, right? We're not big bang approach and moving everything over. Allows them to get comfortable, get used to it, open it up to the end user community. So it's been fairly successful. So if you're a company like looking to explore what might be the right first step in that direction to create a hybrid scenario with BPC plus SAC, again, would be happy to share some other use cases or experiences that we've went through to share the good and the bad, quite honestly, right? If we definitely will always have lessons learned and things that we will continue to repeat and also not repeat. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the actual product comparisons, right? And then we'll jump into a demonstration and kind of walk through some of those within the different Excel and web interface. This is more of a high-level slide, right? So just comparing, major product areas between BPC and SAC. So just to do a couple call-outs here, as far as SAC, I don't have it 100% filled in for the consolidation line. I will say that, like I said, we've been very successful. I've been asked several times, hey, can we consolidate in SAC? And the answer is yes. There have been times, though, that going through kind of an evaluation, we would recommend that if you have complex consolidations, right, where we have multiple ownership structures or other, we may look at it and say it may be well suited for group reporting versus SAC, as an example. But we typically will review that and let you know. We've been able to be very successful with, if you're using BPC for consolidations, typically to be able to transition that over to SAC. The other area that you'll see in the demonstration here in just a moment, down below where we have SAC that's not quite there compared to BPC around Excel. And I look at that as, I'll show you some examples when we get into Excel, but that EPM report builder is pretty slick when it comes to wanting to build reports and all the different functions and options you have. A lot of end users really like that functionality in the Excel add-in. And SAC is getting there. In my opinion, it's just not 100% there yet. So they have added in the last 6 months some really good, for lack of better words, added enhanced functionality within that Excel interface that we'll kind of talk through. But, you know, when we look at what SAC can do, right, compared to where some limitations are, some big limitations, right, that we're not going to ever really see in BPC is more of that combined BI analytics dashboard functionality, right, and to be able to kind of marry both your reports and your visualizations together. Of course, we could do some of that in Excel, but to have, again, maybe more of a slick web interface to be able to easily drag and drop objects, widgets, and connect those and align those with the data sets, it's a pretty easy self-service tool within SAC. Some of the other areas that are pretty broad are predictive, right? So SAC has built-in predictive functionality. BPC doesn't necessarily have that built in. Yes, you know, we can build some customization within script logic and other, but it's not as, you know, out of the box, ready to go as the SAC tool is. And then just kind of from a broad, when we look at planning in general, at least from my experience on the BPC side in SAC, pretty well stacks up. However, from a performance standpoint, SAC can handle bigger volumes of data versus, you know, if we want to do SKU level planning where we're running driver-based, you know, volume times ASP type calculations at a SKU level, that, in my opinion, or at least in my experience in the past, BPC can churn a little bit for that, right? It might take a little bit longer. SAC seems to handle, probably with the HANA engine underneath it, seems to handle those larger data sets better. So just, again, all in all, with planning in general, we're seeing a little bit faster, you know, again, more dynamic planning being able to be done within the SAC layer. And again, this slide, probably a lot of information, and I will cover off some of this when we move over into the demo. But really from an end user perspective, again, if you're more new to SAP Analytics Cloud, you know, BPC is primarily Excel. Of course, we have, you know, web-based process flows or administration, but in SAP Analytics Cloud, we're more primary, you know, our primary, you know, reporting, admin, everything is really primarily web-based. And we have more of a newer Excel add-in, right, that we're starting to expand more into. New functionalities been added so that we can, you know, again, start to mirror a little bit closer to that BPC, that EPM add-in that you see within the BPC tool. Database structures are the same. We already talked about kind of the reporting, the analytics. Some of the, you know, from a data integration standpoint, obviously BPC has data manager. You build your transformations and your conversions through those Excel files, again, pulling them up via Excel. SAC is a little bit different. Again, all of that being web focused primary. The UI and everything is really driven through the web, where you have the ability to set up those rules, but it's all really within the web interface. I will also say that from an integration standpoint, what you are getting with SAC are some of those direct connects, right? So with a friendly UI, I should say. So it's not just, you know, coding and having to understand what I want to pull in like you might need to do from a SQL query or other. It allows you to kind of drag and drop. I want to bring in my account field and my entity field and my, you know, cost center field, and it allows me to kind of have a friendly UI to do a lot of that drag and drop to define what I want for my query and my transformations. So a little bit, I like that aspect, although certainly the Excel and BPC conversions are pretty user friendly as well. So we talked about predictive, obviously it's really primarily just in SAP Analytics Cloud from product comparison perspective, and just kind of overall on the model design. I'll show you some of those, but pretty well stacks up, in terms of BPC administration is also done. Again, I'm just kind of generalizing in the most part that when I'm talking through a lot of this, that we're looking at BPC NetWeaver standard option. There are some variations, right, as we talk about, BW embedded, for example, and certainly some variations if we're talking about the Microsoft version. But in general, there's no big limitation between the two in terms of dimensionality and things along those lines. So I'll showcase, a couple of those in terms of the actual design and modeler functionality. It still remains the same. This is a business-owned tool, right? It's not necessarily IT-owned. I will say that SAP Analytics Cloud also will range and expand probably outside of that finance organization. So there is a little bit more structuring that might need to be done, where we may have more, say, operational analytics, dashboards, things of those lines that may actually be, that portion might be owned more within, an IT space versus kind of the finance organization. So versus BPC, because it didn't have these additional capabilities, really, was more, maybe maintained and owned only or solely within the business or finance community. So when we talk about planning, I'll highlight that a little bit, but a lot of similarities. Although, they're both web-based, there's a little bit, obviously, there's going to be some nuances or differences between the two. But again, similar language in terms of like member sets and other, that again, from a transition perspective, when I'm moving from BPC to SAC, a lot of that is somewhat comparable, usually pretty easy. That learning curve is a little bit smaller if you're, again, coming from a BPC environment versus another solution or versus just, like Excel. One of the main differences that I will show you, if you've already seen standard overviews of SAC, right, you're probably familiar with more of the flexible planning capabilities that SAC has versus BPC, right? Being able to plan at a full year at, any level in the hierarchy, versus just in BPC, really having to still get to that base level to be able to load those in. And then, again, collaborative, the functionality in SAC, the ability for SAC to send automated emails and reminders and, and have those chats with things attached to them, all of that, none of it really exists in BPC. So just some of that inherent functionality, I can click on a button, I can share it, it goes to somebody's inbox, they just click the link, it opens up, right? So that takes the guesswork out of, in BPC, I have to go to, edit and go or open up my report library and find what I'm looking for. So there's a lot of nice collaboration and streamlined approach to a lot of the processes within SAC. So I will jump over into a couple different areas that I just wanted to demo, right, and probably spend the rest of the bulk of the time we have together in. And real fast, I just wanted to pull up, just in case we do have anybody on our webinar today that is new to SAC. I look at SAC as pretty much being able to do, again, from that product comparison, that first slide, primarily everything that BPC is able to do from a planning and consolidation standpoint, but we have, and then plus, right? We have the ability to create those dashboards and those visualizations. One thing that you'll see in the demo, but one area that a lot of my current clients' projects that we've done that they've taken advantage of in SAC is bridge reporting, right? So being able to have dynamic bridge reporting, that bridge reporting that might be broken down into different walks, PVM type calcs, All of those have proved to be really a nice feature for a lot of companies. That that is an area where sometimes it's a little bit tedious within Excel, and you can't have necessarily them be as dynamic, right? If you want to look at something at a total level, but then at an entity level, at a product group level, right? In SAC, it makes it very easy to do that. We have that visualization combined with the data. And then on the flip side is we also have the predictive capability in SAC, right? So as I mentioned before, that kind of lacks in BPC. We have in SAC, there's a lot of out-of-the-box capabilities there, whether it be predictive forecasting or running kind of the predictive engine within the tool. All of that, all of those kind of core capabilities is what makes up SAC. So just in case that we've got any new to SAC users or those on our webinar today. The other key thing that I just want to call out is that if we are coming from a BPC environment, the individuals that, product development team that was responsible for, and that is responsible for the programming, the development of SAC, they were product owners of BPC back in the day. So you will see, that's why we see a lot of these similarities, I guess, within the two tools, whether it be around model maintenance or again, setting up a model and dimensions to now some of the Excel formulas and things that are coming out. So it's just it's nice to see that, again, from a BPC moving over to an SAC environment. Again, the end user skill sets should be somewhat transferable, right? You should be able to pick up on a lot of things within SAC from your already BPC experience. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to the demo. From an end, I look at this as like, okay, if I were an end user transitioning from BPC to SAC, what are some of the core things that I would want to know? And then I'll do the same from an administration standpoint. We'll jump into some of the modeler and security, again, just kind of highlight a couple things there. And then again, if we've got extra time, I have a couple slides on actual use cases. If we don't end up having time, then certainly feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to provide some of that detail to you. So with that, let me do two things here. I'm going to start in Excel. Okay. All right, so just to kind of level set, right? Looking at from an end user kind of report builder perspective, you'll notice on the top here, you'll notice I have my BPC add-ins, and I also, my EPM, my data manager, and then I also have one for SAP Analytics Cloud. Looks like I was signed out while I was talking, so I'm just going to click the sign in button, and I'm going to get myself signed back in here. Just one second. There we go. And let me try and get rid of the designer here for a second. There we go. Okay. So where I wanted to first kind of compare and contrast the reporting functionality in Excel. I don't, just to be transparent, I don't think that the report builder functionality, like adding a table, is worth saying that's comparable to BPC. Adding a table in the SAC add-in is basically, is more of a query tool. So just to kind of give you an idea, if I come in here and I say I want to add a table, I can come in and I can, I'm just going to search on one that we use for training many times. So I'll just open up this one. What that does is it starts me off with the introductory table, if you will, right? And so you can see here, it just pulled in actual data, my net income. This is my model name. So one of the things that is nice is that it allows us to have multiple different models. I can have as many different tables as I want on my page here, right? I can select different models. And I don't have where I have an EPM context pane necessarily. I know, in the past with BPC, it'd be challenging if I needed to have, if I were toggling between two tabs here that had different models, and it would sometimes wouldn't always automatically change. It'd be a little clunky there. Sometimes that, front end Excel and BPC would, again, get maybe a little caught up there. You'd have to log out and log back in. This is a little bit smoother from that standpoint. Again, allows us to have multiple different models on the page. The downside is that right now I don't have like an EPM context pane. I'll show you in my income statement example where I have filters. I have some dimension filters set up within the page, but right now I have basically everything that's set up individually by tab. When I mentioned before, this is more like a query tool, right? So I can expand and I can expand, right? And I can do a couple different things in terms of formatting, but the formatting pretty much is what it is. So if I draw your eyes up and to the right, I can click and open up my designer, right? And this is where I have the ability to add my rows and columns, right? So I can come in and maybe I want to add my entity dimension, and it'll go ahead and, sorry, I meant to add that to my columns, not my rows. Let me fix that for a second. And then I can also add, here we are, sorry about that. Let me go and add that. Oh, no, I am adding it to my columns. Oh my goodness. I wanted to add it to my rows. Here we go. Okay. So, you can do things like obviously add in your different dimensions to your rows and columns. You have some capabilities to say you want like the parent nodes to be, if I want them to be like above or below, I have some functionalities there. But really, as you can see, this, I can expand and I can continue to expand. I can go in and I have a filter here, right, that may identify where I want to add in both actual and forecast. So that from a query perspective, it's very fast. I can go in, I can make my selections, and can, again, great for pulling certain data sets out and being able to work with them. What I can't do from this view is, when I look at, it's really kind of from a formatted perspective. So if I just, change this, let's just say, right, and I change this color, not that I hope nobody wants that color, but and I just refresh the table, you're going to see that it takes away that color, right? It brings me back to standard. So some of these items, can I get the question, well, Beth, can I take this and do a data dump and then link off of it? Absolutely. We've done that in the past. This is also still used for planning. In many cases. So to give you another perspective here, keep in mind, I don't have time in here, or I may not have profit center, or, again, I'm looking at total net income for my total entity for forecast. I still, even though I'm in the Excel environment, whether I'm in web or Excel, I can plan flexibly at any level in my hierarchy. And I can do Excel formulas, which in the web, you're a little bit more restricted to be able to just do whatever Excel formulas. But I can come and say, well, maybe I just want to add 20,000, just to give an idea, to my total company level, my world here. Once I do that, it'll give me some indication that, hey, you're starting to enter in numbers. And then much like in the EPM, you have a planning section here, and I can process that data. So when I do that, it automatically will highlight everything in yellow because it's saying, hey, we just disaggregated or took that 20,000 and pushed it all the way down into your individual organizations. If I were to open up net income, it would have impacted every account, every time period. So that went pretty quick, right? So those type of things where we do wanting to do flexible planning at an annual level, or I just want to plan my total T&E. I don't want to plan by the 50 T&E accounts that I have underneath there. All of that is probably the number one, in my opinion, differentiator and benefit when it comes to planning and SAC. is to have that ability to kind of be flexible if I want to plan by month, if I want to plan by quarter. So that just automatically changed it. One of the other big benefits is, you know, in BPC, sorry, I have to make sure I get my acronyms right. In BPC, when I make a change here, right, and I go up and I click my EPM Save Data icon, it tells me I've got X amount records to send, and it sends it. The problem is that I can't necessarily always see what the result is. So in this case, if I had drivers off of this, if I, you know, again, had other circumstances or other numbers, I can go in and I can view everything. If this was a number that I didn't like, I can go back and I can say revert, and it'll go ahead and revert all of my data back to what it was. Now, keep in mind, it's my formula here, of course, which can be good and bad in both cases. But again, the important concept there is that I have the ability to load data and either revert or publish it. So I get a final say as to whether I want to publish this to, you know, kind of final reporting. Otherwise, but if I don't publish it, it stays within a a private version for myself, right, under my name, my username. Okay, so outside of that, that's really the big difference, right? When we're adding and we're using tables, there are some nice functions like copy table or other. If I want to remove things though, I mean, it's as easy as just getting rid of it, right? Deleting those columns, and I can just start from scratch. Secondary, the other thing that I really wanted to show is more of a print ready report. This is where, sorry, let me move this so I can get rid of my builder here. This is where I'm seeing with more of my projects these days, where we have kind of a combination of web plus Excel. I have some companies that are very specific in their formatting for their reporting books. And just to be honest, you know, for example, here, this is a perfect example where I am merging the time across 3 columns. In the web interface, you're going to be limited. You're going to not be able to merge that across 3 columns. Yes, you could do some, you know, kind of tricky formatting, you know, adding text or others, but just from a standard perspective, it would show up in the top left. So for those companies that are very specific in formatting, they are using the Excel interface just for kind of their published books, if you will. I don't know why I'm missing my actual data here, but in any event, let me try and refresh this here for 1 second and see if I get my data to come back. But a couple key things just to call out here is we have the EPM get data. So you may be familiar if you're keeping up with SAC, but we have get formulas, this get data, as well as set data. So get data is going to be your, I probably just don't have any data in this. Get data is going to be your EPM retrieve, and set data is going to be your EPM save. So if you're using this functionality in BPC today, same functionality exists in SAC. So in addition to that, I have a filter section, right? So I can come in here and I can basically decide, you know, maybe I don't have any actual data. Let me choose a company code that does. And when you do that, you'll see that those green circles and pop up, and that means that it's refreshing the data. I don't know what happened to my data here, so I apologize. Same thing with time. I can, you know, again, do the same thing, or I can come in here and search for it, and it'll go ahead and pop up into my search. So you can start to see where we have, you know, some similarities. We have the ability now to have filters. We have the ability to do, you know, kind of get as well as sending data. And then we also have things like, if I click on this link, you can see member property, right? So similar to in BPC, where we may have member description formulas or all those EPM, you know, probably about 1.5 years ago, there was maybe 2 or 3 these SAP formulas. Now we have, you know, maybe 15, and they continue to grow. So any event, just like I just put one cell out here just to show you the set data. The formulas are the same. So if you use retrieves today, if you use save data, again, from that learning curve, it's just really one really slight change in the term in the actual name of the formula ID, but selecting the dimension as well as the dimension ID, all of that remains the same. So from that standpoint, it's pretty easy to jump over into that. And then the last thing that's a similarity now with using Excel is that you have this capability to run what we call a data action in SAC, which is just like running a data manager package in your BPC, right? So I can come in here and I had a refresh budget button on here, but you can go in and you can basically click the play button and you can run through, it'll basically run through the calculations and refresh the tab for you. Much like Data Manager Package, you also can have prompts. I'll show that in the web version. But ideally, you can start to see that, okay, from an Excel environment or an Excel interface, I can set up, my formatted reports. I can, I can replace them with my get formulas and my set formulas if I have retrieves and saves. Where we do see, I do have filters. So this would kind of replace your context selections if you had locks, but then had only a couple open to be able to change. We would now in SAC, we're just doing that on the face of the actual report. And then, as I mentioned before, as we look at like the actual adding table functionality, that's where we have more of our, get rid of that, let me put that here. This is where now you can see, again, the formatting is more in a query, right? This is companies that I'm working with. They are using, say, they may have their standard print ready reports that they want specifically formatted a certain way in Excel here, and then they'll have a separate tab on the side here that allows them to do some quick drill downs and again, querying their data. So that's the Excel, right? So those are kind of the similarities and differences. For the companies that I have actually moved over from BPC to SAC completely, actually many of them have done reporting in both the web and Excel. So they've started and were more comfortable, quite honestly, building their reports in the Excel environment and getting comfortable with that, and then have started to transition and start to move some of those reports into into the web interface, where you will start to have better formatting. The formatting is nicer than this in the web and allows the drill down. Where we get to the very specific formats, you also give up some of the dynamic drill down capabilities. So again, kind of take that into perspective as well as we look at kind of the compare and contrast between the two solutions, as well as even whether if you're moving over to SAC, whether you want to jump into the Excel interface or try out the web interface. Okay, so I'm going to hop over and give a couple additional things from an end user view, right? And what we're used to. Primarily, most of these are going to be different, right? Because in BPC, we work in Excel. But just a couple things that are somewhat similar that you may or may not use today. Just to kind of level set, if you're brand new to SAC, I was taking the assumption maybe that our group here today maybe knows a little bit, but just so that I'm not jumping too far ahead, we have a main menu here. SAC runs off of browser, Chrome, Edge, so on and so forth. And just a couple quick things. You can see I have multiple tabs open, right? I can have multiple tabs open, so I can kind of jump between, maybe a modeler function, a reporting function, a launch pad, right? So I have multiple tabs that kind of helps me certainly from a demo perspective, but even in process, right? And actually using the tool for a monthly close or a planning process to have those, the ability to not have to always go, toggle back, and have the separate tabs is nice. In SAC, as I talked about before, some just quick terminology. You'll see instead of an Excel workbook, we have stories, and within a story, we can have multiple pages. And each page, we can have graphs, we can have reports, lots of different functionality that'll exist, but you'll hear me use the term story or stories. I'll talk about around the modeler, around data actions. Data actions are similar or comparable to our script logic and our business rules tables. This is where all of our calculations occur. And then we'll get into a couple additional areas here, but just again, you can kind of see we typically will go from a main menu screen to go launch into different areas. From an end user perspective, right? Every end user has a home page, and within the home page, some companies choose to utilize catalog functionality that I can then, as an end user, have things stamped as favorite for myself, right? So I can jump into like my financial statement planning. You can just jump into that, and that's going to jump into a launch pad that will give me, a launch pad to be able to select different options. Here we go. So here you can see basically my launch pad gives me direction on target setting, maybe some expense planning, overall financial statement, high level financial statement planning, so on and so forth. But one of the things real fast from an end user perspective, if you use business process flows in BPC today, just want to call out that SAC does have a calendar functionality. And it does actually have some nice workflow capabilities. I have a bunch here, but just if I can dial into like this 2023 consolidations one gives just kind of a nice view on where, I may have individual legal entities or regions that are responsible for a consolidation or for a planning process. And again, what this essentially does is from an administration standpoint, I can get visibility into where the users are in their process, right? I can see that West US is only 10% complete, US headquarters 75, so on and so forth. But from an end user perspective, what this does is it's an automated generated workflow process. So I can also, as an end user, receive an email with a link with the story or the workbook that I need to complete, and then I will have to select a submit button where we can set approval, approval levels as well, where that then gets routed to manager or reviewer in SAC. So there's a lot of nice functionality. Just to call out, if you do use, I know there is a BPF or business process flow functionality in BPC. We do have comparable functionality in SAC with a little bit more dynamic, notifications, I guess, right, and collaboration capabilities to kind of auto-generate emails and things along those lines. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the launch pad and then just real quick, another, two more things from a end user perspective and from a planning, kind of looking at planning as well as, let me just open up this report book really quickly. Just to kind of give you a visualization. So a couple things here. This is a story. So for those of you that are new to SAC, right, this is what we would consider a story. You can kind of see we have multiple pages. This would be like your different Excel worksheets within your workbook. And then we do have kind of what we would consider that EPM context pane could be our filter, or what we call a story filter at the top, right? So much like the EPM context, we can have that set up so this impacts every tab, right? And then I also have, if I just move over to my comparative page here, just to give you a different visualization, I also then have the ability to have my page filters, which is similar to what we have really in the Excel environment. So I may have specific filters that I want for maybe a time period for every report in my book, but then I want to be very specific, and maybe I just want to have month to date and year to date, and I can be very, again, to this only impacts just this page or just this tab, right? So similar where we do have kind of an EPM context. Similarly, we also have comment functionalities, but we have commenting where we can comment on a specific data point in SAC. We can comment tied to just a dimension, or we can have a separate widget in a box itself just for a comment thread, if you will. So a lot of different, actually maybe more robust options around commenting in SAC, but just to kind of, if you use comments for variance explanations or other, you'll see that functionality exists as well in SAC. And then finally, again, if you've seen kind of an overview of SAC, you probably are aware of the disaggregation functionality. So, you know, from that standpoint, again, this allows me to go in and to make a change. If I kind of draw your eyes to this bottom box here, and I'm looking at forecast, right? I can expand on my year, and if I want to just update a quarter, I can update a quarter. I can update net sales, right? And if I were to expand on, open up net sales, there's, you know, obviously my gross and my rebates and cash discounts and things along those lines. But the idea is here that, again, I can change the number. I can say I just want to increase or decrease, maybe based on events or things that I know my forecast for Q4 should change. Same idea, right? So then it will go ahead and update and then weight that proportionately based off of what my current Q4 forecast is. So again, this was done at a parent, at a Q4 level, at a total, at a net sales, right? Not at each base level individual account. So this has proved to be a huge, significant difference, right, between the two solutions, because, you know, absolutely, we can do target setting in BPC. Typically in the past, it's required us to set up a base level account for those key target areas, whether that be, you know, margin, OI, you know, things of those nature, and then be able to push that back. So that's not that it's not possible, but in SAC, it's just inherent. It will run that, you know, and again, unless you actually check that you don't want it to disaggregate, for example. Already talked about the data actions, but again, just to focus one last time, data actions are comparable to our data manager package. And this is just, I wanted to pop open because this gives us an idea of similar prompts, right? So where you're always selecting category, entity, and time, perhaps in your data manager package, these are all customizable, right? Where we want to say whatever we want to set up as a prompt, right? If we want to limit, you know, profit center or cost center, all of those capabilities work within the data actions. Okay. So I'm going to pause there, just going to switch gears and put my administrator hat on real fast and just talk through a couple things real quickly. So we have in SAC the modeler function, right? So I'm just going to close my main menu to give us a little bit more view here. And let me just open up a generic model that we use sometimes. So in the modeler, couple things to point out. I always like to point out the account dimension because this is where we see many similarities as we would going into the account dimension in our BPC, right? So from an administration standpoint, the learning curve in the pure model maintenance is small. It's very comparable, and whether it's, you know, ID, description, the hierarchy, right, parent child, there is a different functionality in SAC for level-based hierarchies, which is not comparable to BPC. These are things that are more commonly done for things like maybe cost center or product that have kind of a distinct level base that makes it easy to build different hierarchies. But it also has, like this here, traditional parent-child hierarchy. It does have where in BPC we would have member formulas separate. This is actually, I feel, a little bit nicer. We have an account formula. This is for your gross margin percents and your other KPIs, where we can just go in and add that formula directly here into our account dimension itself. Things like account type, rate type, right? These are all should be comparable to what we see in BPC today. An enhancement, I would say, over what BPC has for model maintenance, especially in the account dimension, are things like exception aggregations. So if I have today an average selling price and I want to look at that at a total product group level or even a total product level, in BPC today, it's just naturally inherent to aggregate everything. And so exception aggregation in SAC allows me to say, no, you know what, my average selling price, we want to be an average. And so no matter what, if I'm looking at a total year or total product, all of those levels, it will average, give me an average number and not an aggregation, not a sum of those different prices. So that's just one example, a more common example, but there's obviously different uses and several uses. Average is a very popular one, but there's a whole laundry list of different exception aggregations outside of that traditional summing up that we can use. Other comparisons, if I come in, oh, I guess I didn't talk about, just to kind of click on the hierarchy, right? So much like the BPC, the comparisons there, I can drag and drop much like you can in BPC. So again, in general, the model maintenance compared to BPC model maintenance is very similar. When we look at things like work status, right? We call it data locking in SAC, same kind of idea, but here it has more of a UI where I can come in and just, expand on time and say, okay, well, for forecast 2013, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's locked, right? So, but again, similar functionality, right? We call it work status in BPC. One of the differences that is a little bit something to, if I open back up my entity dimension, is security. So it's somewhat similar, but has enough differences to point out, right? Is that the read-write access is tied to a dimension and not a model, right? So in BPC, how we may build a finance model, and we may secure it based off of the entity and based off of time and based off of version. In SAC, if I turn on my data access here, you'll notice that it automatically then creates a read and a write. And this is actually within my, my entity dimension itself. So what does this mean? This means that if I set up Susie and she has read and write access for Australia, then that means that if I use this this same dimension, a shared dimension in my HR model, it also is going to give her read and write access, where maybe we only want her to have read access to Australia in that case. Again, just trying to throw an example out there, but it is from a design considerations, something that we look at, which is a big enough change or difference than the way that we secure models in BPC. Real quick, then, the last two things to cover off from differences, let me just discard that, is I talked about data actions. So again, not to go into too much detail here, happy to provide additional detail if you need it, but data actions are like your script logic. There is, if you are a user, an admin that is used to creating script logic or tweaking it, there are similarities, right? So like an XDIM member set here is just called member set, right? I personally think that in SAC, it's a little bit easier because once I start to type something, it actually gives me suggestions, right? So I can start to type and it'll give me all of my options where I can just select it versus having to go back to my account dimension and find the account number, so on and so forth in BPC. So some nice added enhancements, but overall skill set, you should be able to pick up the advanced formulas in SAC as comparable to the script logic in, script logic in BPC. Finally, you'll know, again, going back to the security conversation, if you're using audit, there are similar audit functionality where you can dial into a specific user, specific data change, as well as like more admin activities auditable as well. So those type of things exist. And then, as I mentioned before, the read-write access is tied to the dimension, but you as a user are tied to a role. And then you can be a read-only role, you could be, and we may have multiple different variations of roles. And then much like BPC, we tie them together in teams, right? And then that team can be applied. One thing that I also didn't talk about security that is an additional layer is, within your files or your file directory, you have, all your folders, and within your folders, themselves, they also can be secured. So many different levels of security and ways that you can go ahead and restrict access or allow, whether that be in different workspaces, different folders, or just different roles and read and write access. So, okay, I know we are at time. I'm just getting, I will leave you with, again, I did have some slides here for use cases if you're interested in some of the companies that we've actually helped at this point move from BPC or start their journey, right, moving from BPC to SAC in some form or fashion. Now, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to, again, provide the details in this deck, as well as any information or help I can provide you with. So thank you so much for joining today, and hope everyone has a good rest of their day.